Hello everybody, Yogi here. Hope you're doing well, because I'm doing well. We are outside of New Orleans, Louisiana. Today we are checking out probably one of the most famous plantations down south, besides the myrtles of course, Oak Alley Plantation. It's a huge area to cover. I'm going to try to get as much as I can. Unfortunately, no video or photographs are allowed inside the main house, but there's slave quarters, there's all sorts of other neat things to look at here. So let's do some road tripping at Oak Alley Plantation, shall we? Here's a little board on slavery at Oak Alley. If you want to pause it and try to read it a little bit, go right ahead. I'm not going to read everything to you. There's a lot of storyboards. And over here are the slaves' quarters. Pognon worked as a seamstress and hairdresser. Selena, Roman, and her daughters. She was at their beck and call, brushing their hair and mending their clothes. As a house slave, Pognon's appearance was a way for Selena to show off her own wealth. She wore better clothes and shoes than most slaves, but it also meant that she was expected to be presentable at all times. If her appearance did not meet expectations, she was punished. Again, there's poster boards everywhere. Expectations. Life as a house slave. House slaves waited on the Roman family. They ran errands, served dinner, and watched the children. While less physically demanding than field work, a house slave's duties lasted well into the night, only ending when the Romans went to bed. They were issued better clothes and store-bought shoes. Since they reflected the Roman social status, they were to be neat and presentable at all times. This here is a laundry kettle. They were very large and similar to sugar kettles in size and weight. While the two could be used interchangeably, most plantations had a fixed set of kettles and tubs reserved for laundry. These were positioned near the kitchen or work area where slaves monitored open fires, and the plantation mistress monitored the slaves. Water well. Wells were placed around the plantation where they were needed. This included barn areas, kitchens, and the slave quarters. Large wooden tops were made to keep small children and animals from falling in. Why would a slave visit the sick house? Sugar plantations were very hazardous work environments. Heat, intensive labor, boiling sugar. These compounded the usual dangers of sanitation, abuse, and malnutrition. On the bookshelf are a few reasons why a slave would visit the sick house. And over there it says pneumonia, infection, dysentery, worms, yellow fever, childbirth, work accident, cholera, and malnutrition. So this was a sick house. Both sides. Caring for their own sick nurses. Augustine and Thali were the plantation's enslaved sick nurses and were responsible for the community's general care. With no formal training, these women relied on experience treating their fellow slaves with both African and Western medicine. If their own methods failed, or if there was an accident, they would ask permission to summon Dr. Merrick. It's M-E-R-R-I-C-U, Merrick. Here's some cooking kettles. Rtwy was born into slavery around 1799, first designated a house slave. He was repeatedly demoted, first to ox cart driver and finally to the lowest class, field slave. With each demotion, his life became increasingly difficult. He received fewer clothes, was given harder jobs, and worked longer hours. Being demoted to field slave, he also had a bad effect on his health. It also had a bad effect on his health, and he developed debilitating rheumatism and asthma. Look at that. He slept on that sack? I don't even know what to call that. That was his bed, apparently. Wow. Amelia. Amelia is one of the many field slaves kept at Oak Alley. Field slaves were considered to be the lowest status of slave, far removed from the house slaves. Women field slaves handled much of the general maintenance on the plantation. Amelia worked with Felicite. Oh man, Chloe. All these names, I'm not even going to try to read them. Together, the women dug ditches, repaired roads, and even maintained the levee. So again, if you want to read the names, they're right there. But this is how they lived. Sleeping on a really disgusting mattress on the floor. Hardly any clothes. Pretty disgusting. It's very eye-opening. Oh, well, you can actually go in these. Very nice. Life of labor. Restraints. Punishment and confinement. Shackles. Sugar cane knives, a hoe, axes and scythes. There's a shovel down there. Ice tongs. There's some bricks from 1830 to 1865. Ante and postbellum china. Some pearlware. It's really kind of eye-opening to see how they lived back then. Man, here's a wall of, I believe, all the names of the slaves that they had. Between 1836 and the Civil War, over 220 men, women, and children were enslaved at Oak Alley, dehumanized and quantified. Like any other commodity, they appear in sales records and inventories, yet as people they have been forgotten by history. This is a respectful recognition of the people whose backs this plantation was built. For most of them, a name is all that remains of their story. Outhouses were not common on plantations, and most slaves relieved themselves in ditches or behind trees. If there was an outhouse, it was reserved for women. After emancipation, however, former slaves built sets of outhouses behind their cabins. Door carvings in the shape of a sun or moon provided light and ventilation, as well as marked which privy was for men and which was for women. And there they are back there. There's the women's and the men's. And here's a storyboard on emancipation. It's unfortunate that even after emancipation, people were looked at differently. Up until the 60s, actually. So it says here, after the Civil War, what happened to the quarters is the title of the storyboard. After the Civil War, Oak Alley passed through a number of owners who used these quarters for worker housing. At first they turned the doubles into single cabins. Later they attached additions. Even as they were building, however, the original structures were steadily falling apart. Workers and their families continued to live in the crumbling houses until the turn of the century. Unsanitary and unsafe, they were demolished around 1900. So these are reproductions. These aren't the actual slave quarters. Some of the pieces might be actual time period, but these are reconstructed. And the other side. Little crib for the baby, or younger child. Not much of an improvement. And here is the most beautiful driveway, or one of the most beautiful driveways you will ever walk up to. I mean, this is just amazing right here. So we just got done with the tour inside of Oak Alley Plantation, and this side we actually came in on the back side. I'm now on the front side, and you can hear those Louisiana summer storms forming in the background. Now right over across the street there's that little levee there, and on the other side of that levee is the Mississippi River. So they're right up along the Mississippi River. But here's the view. I'm not going all the way back. No, these gorgeous oaks lining, and then there's the plantation in the background, in the front. Now my thoughts on the plantation on the inside. Pretty neat. You know, as most of these plantations, I think with the exception of Rose Dawn, it's a lot of refurbished furniture. Well, not refurbished furniture, but not the period furniture. They do have some, but there is not a whole lot of actual items that the family still owned in the building. So pretty neat. It was $25 to take the tour and walk the grounds. You know, you could film pretty much everywhere else, but no photography inside the house. We were allowed to take pictures up on the balcony that went around the house, so I took a couple of those. Other than that, pretty neat. Pretty neat experience, just being able to say, hey man, I checked out Oak Alley Plantation. Pretty neat. If you're down in the New Orleans area, it's only about 50 minutes away. So if you're in the area and you want to check out one of the most gorgeous plantations down here in the south, check out Oak Alley. And here's one of the gardens. Very nice sculptured garden on one of the sides of the house. Okay, and here we go. There's Chuckie. Blacksmith. The Blacksmith Shop.
Cafe.
It's over there. The Blacksmith Shoppy. So this is where the blacksmith did his work. Ooh-wee, can you imagine that? Not only having to deal with the 90-degree heat and humidity all the time, but then having to deal with that heat. It takes a special kind of person to deal with that. There's some boards if you want to read them. Terminology. Blacksmithing in Louisiana, craft and legacy. Unless you have a 75-inch TV, you're probably not going to be able to read any of this stuff. But you might. I don't know. I'm just going to show it, and if you can read it, awesome.